And our final topic of this edition of Timeout is presented by Atlantic Tire and Service, with 7 North Carolina locations to service you and your vehicle. And let's talk about the Wake Forest Demon Deacons and Steve Forbes. They are squarely on the NCAA bubble. Can they make a showing of some repute in Charlotte this week? And is Steve Forbes the guy who is truly going to get the old gold and black back to March Madness?
You know, one thing that stands out to me about Steve's tenure there, and as it relates to paying more attention to it now than before and looking backwards, is that they've struggled at the end of the season. And that's the one thing that if you're Steve, if you're the staff, you're a little concerned about if it's repeating itself and is there something different that has to be done. What you hope is that the AD doesn't think something has to be done, to let someone else come in and figure it out. This is one of those things, and I think David mentioned this, and we talked about it in the changes that have happened elsewhere, certainly here locally at NC State, but around the league, Miami, Virginia, Florida State. What is the relationship? This is really going to come down. This is going to be a true test of the trust in the relationship that John Curry and Steve Forbes have. At the end of the day, that's what's going to drive this. And I think it's a different conversation at the end of this year than it ever has been because of all the aforementioned things we talked about. The portal, the upcoming cap time that's going to put a limit on how much you can pay guys, what you can get guys, if you're able to front load to keep some guys on your roster right now, and the ability to self-evaluate. I think that's one thing. Take out all the metrics of the finances involved. I think now more than ever, a real key for college basketball staffs is, while you want to have the relationship with your players, because it still is very important. And I think coaches in their nature want to have that relationship. They want to be someone who can help these kids get to the next level, wherever that level may be, socially, professionally, financially, but they value the relationships for the most part. Even though that's being tested because this is more of a transactional nature than we're in, can you have the hard conversations to say what's in your best interest? Now, this was always the tricky conversations you'd have, especially when a new coach comes in. You couldn't force kids to transfer in the past. You could fabricate some reasons or answers for why it did happen, whether it was academic, whether it was fit, whether it was playing time, but we all know exactly what it was. Now you don't really have to hide behind that because the kids don't have to sit out like they did in the past. That punishment has been taken away. So if it's in their best interest to develop and play somewhere else, if it's not going to work out there, and I'm not talking about a coaching change, I'm talking about the coaches that are still there. I think this is really going to show up in Wake Forest if, in fact, Steve and his staff come back for a 6th year next year. Can they self-evaluate in an honest and effective way to have the conversations with the players that are expected to be back or have a chance to be back, and not just throw them into the portal to be cannon fodder for someone else to take a chance on them, or even make it a financial decision because they don't have enough money for them, or maybe they can get more money there or what have you. Can they really have the conversation with them to know that, look, if we're having this conversation next year, you ain't having it with me? Because clearly if it's 6 years, especially with the ability to turn a program around now quickly than ever before, even if you're in the middle of a contract or a time period, I think this is a conversation that, one, starts with Steve and with John, and then 2, happens with all the players that are currently there expected to be back. And then, does the staff have the wherewithal to have preparation in the portal to get the right fit? Steve strikes me as the type of guy that needs the right fit. Some of these coaches can coach anybody. I'm not so sure that fits Steve Forbes' MO. I think he needs to have the right fit. If he can get the right fit of players that are available to him, if they can truly self-evaluate and make some hard conversations a little bit easier, then yes, we'll see them back for a 6th year. I don't think we'll see them in the NCAA tournament, sans a magical run in Charlotte coming up this weekend. But this is really going to be a test and maybe a case study for a team that should be better, that has been better in the past, that can be better, that may or may not have the resources. We're going to find out. And when it's all said and done, is that the guy that can take them into the next year and get it done according to the AD? Well, I think we're going to find that out pretty quickly if we don't find out before that.
This is the moment we waited for. Everything you want is right here. We gon' give them what they came for. We gon' take it up from last year. Shoot on my shot, boy, I'm long range. Me and the team on the same thing. Stayed down, never switched up. Only thing changed was the game. I'm in the zone now. Nothing can change what we on now. When I pull up, know it's going down. Foot on the gas, ain't no slowing down. Aiming for greatness, no settling. Kick down the doors, they won't let me in. Taking no L's, yeah, I gotta win. Watch me kick down the doors, they won't let me in. Who running the game now? Foot on the gas, can slow down. No, my team, we holding it down. We know we running it now. Watch the game change. Watch the game change. Watch the game change.
Yeah, Mike, the Steve Forbes question is a fascinating one for reasons I'll get to in a second. But in terms of the Demon Deacons bubble status, I think they're essentially in the same spot almost as the North Carolina Tar Heels. The biggest problem for Wake is the same as the biggest problem for Carolina. As we speak, the only team Wake has beaten that we know will get an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament is the Michigan Wolverines. And as we speak, the only team Carolina has beaten that we know will get an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament is UCLA. Historically, you can't have only one such win and get the benefit of the doubt. So what's going to happen in Charlotte? Probably Carolina wins its opener. And then who faces whom in the quarterfinals? It is Wake against Carolina. One is right on the bubble. The Tar Heels, I mean, squarely. The Demon Deacons have slid just a little bit, but they're among the first four out or the next four out in just about every projection. So it's the old loser leaves town match, right? I mean, truly the loser does literally leave town and head back to campus, but the loser is also out of the NCAA tournament conversation, and the winner goes on to play Duke. And because neither of those teams has a really good second win, I think either one of them has to beat the Blue Devils in the semifinals to get into the big dance. That is unlikely for the Tar Heels, and I think it's even more unlikely for the Demon Deacons, although Wake did give Duke a very good game in Winston-Salem during the regular season. Bottom line is, Steve Forbes has been at Wake Forest for 5 years now. Years 2, 3, 4, and 5 we know 3 of them all ended up right on the bubble and fell short. And now it looks like year 5 is going to be the same, right on the bubble, but fall short. Here's what, to me, is the fascinating question for John Currie at Wake Forest and that administration. And you, Mike, as the AD, would have to ask yourself this question, and Coach Keating, as the coach, maybe has been on the receiving end of this question. At Carolina, even though this is Hubert Davis's second disappointing year in 4 seasons of his tenure, they believe that he's a good enough coach because of that regular season title, because of those big wins over Coach K, because of that run to the national title game in 2022. They've seen enough good things from Hubert Davis as a coach. You can't be a bad coach and beat Coach K in his final game in Cameron Indoor Stadium. You got to know some X's and O's. Your players have to believe in you to get as much better as they did late in the season, maybe 3 different times in Hubert Davis's 4 years at Carolina. Alternatively, NC State asked itself a question. Hey, Kevin Keatts just went to the tournament twice in a row, had that Final Four run, ACC title, horrible year this year. Do we believe, with the right NIL money, with a better infrastructure, same with Hubert Davis, do we believe he's the right guy? Whereas Bubba Cunningham said yes on Hubert Davis to those questions through plenty of indigestion and disappointing losses, Boo Corrigan said no about Kevin Keatts, whose highest level success is more recent than either of those guys, right? I think John Currie is going to say yes and keep Steve Forbes. That's just an educated guess. But the fascinating aspect of it is Steve Forbes absolutely has a fascinating eye for talent. If we made a list of transfers into the ACC who were not all that special at their previous school and just absolutely blossomed with the Demon Deacons, Steve Forbes' name would be next to several of them. Alondas Williams was not even a full-time starter at Oklahoma. Steve Forbes helped turn him into the ACC Player of the Year. That's a big deal. You can't taking a 6-point-a-game guy the previous year and he's the ACC Player of the Year. That's not only an eye for talent. That's not just picking some dude, it was all conference at his previous school. Any of us is smart enough to sign an all conference guy if he's a good fit for our system. You can find the 6 point per game guy and envision him as an all ACC player. If Alondes Williams was the only example, that'd be one thing. Hunter Salas couldn't make his way into the starting lineup at Gonzaga. He was averaging like 5 points per game.
Yeah.
He's a 2-time all ACC player. He's playing the best basketball of his life with the Demon Deacons only after getting to Winston-Salem. Those aren't that's not just another story. Those are incredible stories. Meanwhile, you remember the guy Bobby Clintman. He signed him from, I think it was Australia and maybe via a second country. Prior to that, he had Jake LaRavia. He signed out of the Mid-American Conference. That guy's still in the NBA. He found Andrew Carr at the University of Delaware. He was good for the Deacs, and now he's good and starting for the Kentucky Wildcats. Tyree Appleby was a nice player at Florida. He became a first-team All-ACC player with the Demon Deacons. He found Cam Hildreth in England, right? Like he's tapping the international market. He's tapping the major conference transfer market, although not as well this year. Of all those transfers he signed, Trayvon Spillers, the App State guy, was the only one who delivered. And maybe Steve Forbes had a bad transfer portal year at exactly the wrong time. But far more good than bad in terms of identifying the right talent and making pieces fit such that a lot of guys are playing the best basketball of their career, college career, under Steve Forbes. Like, that deserves credit. Now, through the coach's eyes and the X's and O's, why have they played some of their lesser basketball late in these seasons? Why has that happened? Why did the offense, I think it's point guard, but maybe more than that, why did the offense implode this year really bad? You shouldn't have Hunter Salas and Cam Hildreth and Efton Reed and Trayvon Spillers and have a bad offense. Wake's offense was not very good. Why was it a defensive issue prior to this year? Those are more kind of grainy issues, but he does a lot of the bigger things right. The fan base loves him. We don't know how much name, image, likeness support he's getting from people like Mitch Shy, the mega booster, and some of the other Demon Deacon supporters with deep pockets, but that matters too. The AD knows whether he's getting a below average NIL budget or whether he should have better results because he's been getting more resources. We don't have access to all that information. What we know is that Steve Forbes has made Wake Forest a solid, impressive, often entertaining basketball program. After 5 years, that's not usually enough if you haven't made the NCAA tournament, but he's been knocking on the door 4 years in a row. Maybe he surprises us in Charlotte, but my sense is that they're going to give him another chance, and maybe like the Hubert Davis scenario in Chapel Hill, maybe they're going to try to give him more resources to get him over the top.
Well, they didn't give more resources to the football program. That's why they went to Dollar General to get their most recent coach. And it's not to say that the new Demon Deacon football coach won't be the guy that saves the day, but they're not going to go in the portal and be competitive. And they weren't competitive enough to keep Andrew Carr from going to Kentucky. So imagine how good Wake could have been this year if they would have Andrew Carr, who you and I, David, absolutely loved dealing with 2 years ago at the ACC tip-off here in Charlotte. I think a lot of times the ADs really deserve more of the blame for this than the coaches, especially in this modern era. Now, Bubba Cunningham and the trustees and everybody else, as we saw on ESPN.com, everybody in Chapel Hill collectively got in to boost up Carolina football with Bill Belichick. And now they're doing the same with Hubert Davis and giving him a big wad of cash to go out and buy a new staff and to do all these different things. I really would ask, what's John Curry's metrics for success? Because the football program has gone on a downward spiral after Dave Clawson had it up. And now basketball can't get over the hump, and they can't keep players from one year to the next. They have to go and steal guys away from Dustin Kearns up in Boone to keep themselves competitive. So I would think, before you're going to point a finger at Steve Forbes, maybe you need to look at John Curry, because this is a guy who has a past as well. We talked earlier in the show about Will Wade and his past. I'm not saying John Curry has a rule-breaking past, but he doesn't have exactly a consensus-building past as an administrator either. And hey, that's just my opinion. I could be wrong. NC Pork, raising the bacon, raising the bar.